Okay, we just want to say thank you for everyone who's in that video and shared your very personal stories. So I'm here today to talk about all the hard times. There have been hard times forever, from the time of the Garden of Eden, to the trials of Job, to just last week when the typhoon hit Philippines and there were 2,500 people dead at last count. But there are, and always will be trials on earth. God tells us that. God says there will always be trials while we're alive. But once we get to heaven, there's not going to be any more trials. He tells us that. He says once we get to heaven, it'll be good. There'll be no more tough times. But while we're going through these tough times, God says He'll be with us. He'll be with us through every hard time we have. He won't give us more than we can bear. He knows our limits and He won't push us past them. He'll comfort us. He knows it's going to be hard. He knows there might be some tears and some hard nights, but He'll be with us every step of the way and He'll comfort us through those times. And He has a purpose for our trials. Even if we can't always see them, He knows what He's doing and He knows the trials He's giving you. Believing all of what I just said is faith. Faith is not always knowing. Faith is not always understanding. Faith is not always being an expert in that subject. That would be knowledge. If we were asked to have knowledge, then we wouldn't say, grow your faith in the Lord, trust your faith. We would say, grow your knowledge, trust your knowledge. But God doesn't want our knowledge. He doesn't want us to know what He's doing, necessarily. He wants us to trust in Him that He knows what He's doing. He wants us to have so much faith in Him that we don't need to worry about what He's doing. God is in control of every single trial we go through. He is in complete control, and He knows exactly what's happening. So He knows how far you can be pushed. He's not going to make it too difficult for you. He knows how far He can push you, and He'll do that. But He'll be there along the way to comfort you. He never promises it will be easy. He knows there's going to be some tough times. He knows there's going to be some hard times. He knows there might be some tears. But He'll be there all the time. So if you trust in God through these times, He will see you through every single time. But then we ask, why God? Why me? I can tell you 5 other people who I think can deal with my issue better than me. So why are you doing this to me? Why did you allow this to happen? And ministers and priests and scholars and godly men have written and spoken and thought about. They've analyzed it. They've debated this subject. Trusting God through hard times has got to be one of the most challenging parts of being a Christian. Because it's easy to thank God for what you're given. It's easy to thank God for all the many blessings you have. It's easy to ask Him for stuff. But when it comes to trusting Him through really difficult times, that's when it gets hard. And I'm not going to stand up here and pretend I know all the answers and say, I know the exact way that you can trust God. Because I don't know. I didn't figure it out over the last week. But here's what I can tell you. Here's what I did find. God will test our faith. And also what I've noticed is people who have suffered, they're often the strongest people. If you ask them, they'll say that was the turning point. That's when they stopped looking like this and they went to what they really wanted. People who have gone through really tough times, that's when they switched their faith around and really made it worth it. And the ironic thing is that we don't always see God when times are good. Like when we get an A on our civics test, or if we win the lottery, we're not like, oh my goodness, God, thank you so much. We say that, but that's not when we really happens to us. And God works in very mysterious ways. Because untested faith is unreliable faith. Just like with Abraham and Isaac in the Old Testament, when God asks Abraham to take his son up to the top of the mountain and sacrifice him, and Abraham does it, and he gets to the top of the mountain and he's about to sacrifice his son, and God says, no, you don't have to sacrifice him. I just wanted to prove to you that your faith was strong. And I kind of think of it as like basketball practice. Like, you can go out in your driveway and shoot hoops all day long, but that does nothing. It's when you're in a game and you're really tested to see how good you are. Because you're never going to know how good a basketball player you are until you're actually put in a situation where you really need to play. That's like us with Jesus. We can pray all we want, but until you see that sign of adversity coming, and then when you say, oh no, I don't want any part of that. God would not do that. This whole God thing doesn't make sense anymore. That's unreliable faith. That's not true faith. And I want to finish off with a story by a famous philosopher named Plato. And it's called The Allegory of the Cave. Okay, so what it is there's this long cave. And there are all these men sitting down in chairs facing the back of the cave. And they're chained to their chairs so all they can see is in front of them. And behind them is a fire, a flickering fire. And there are men walking back and forth. But all they can see are the shadows of the men. And occasionally the men will talk, but they can only see the shadows. So they think it's the shadows talking. Their perspective is that the shadows are moving, the shadows are talking, the shadows are carrying things. It's all about the shadows. And one day, they're all set free. They can all see behind them. They can all see that there's actually life back here. And that there's plants and flowers and the sky and the sun. There's all this more stuff back here that they couldn't see when they were just facing this way. Isn't that like us and God? Isn't this our perspective facing the cave? Can't we only see the shadows? But God can see back here. God can see what's causing this all to happen. And He doesn't ask us to know what's going on back here. He asks us to trust Him, that He knows what He's doing, because we're not always going to get the shadows. But He'll always get it. So we need to trust in Him that He knows what He's doing, because He does. He does know what's making these shadows move back and forth. But we don't always.